On this episode, Merschman Seeds Area Sales Manager Kent Steinman gives us an update on what's happening in eastern Illinois. Ben addresses articles discussing rainwater, 2,4-D, dicamba, and how infrared imaging may predict soybean variety tolerance. Turk shares the concept of gene editing. Make sure to stick around for the winter-themed jokes from Joe.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cup of Joe, Season 3, Episode 19. I'm filling in for Joe this week. He's on a little R&R, and some time well deserved. But this week we have Kent Steinman, our area sales manager from Eastern Illinois, and Ben as usual. So we're all doing virtual conferences this week, and a lot of things with COVID the way it is. It seems to be the kind of the wave of the future. But Kent, you were at some conferences this week. Tell us about what your takeaways.
Yeah, I was at the 2020 Illinois CCA conference, all virtual. But yeah, we had some good, interesting topics that came up. We had one from University of Illinois, Nathan Klazeski. I'm probably saying that wrong, but he brought up intraveinal chlorosis in soybeans. You know, it may not be all just sudden death. And that's something that I did see this year. And I forget to say this, but if guys next year have issues, we need to take them to a plant clinic to make sure that we get diagnosed right. He did make some interesting discussion, though. One was, there are deficiencies out there, potash, it's going to be in the lower leaves. Can give that iron chlorosis look, or that chlorosis look, magnesium, iron, magnesium. But there are some deficiencies for this that can show up. Another interesting topic that I've not heard before, but he brought up, was they were starting to see, after fungicide was sprayed about 2-3 weeks later, they were starting to see some of that chlorosis in soybeans. And he threw up a study that was done in 2015, which a lot of those aren't being, or probably some are still being used, but they're going to revisit this, I would hope. But they are starting to see some of that from the fungicides. So that could be another thing to look at. It didn't hurt anything, but it makes it look like sudden death.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did they have any particular class of fungicide or anything that they were talking about?
Well, in that 2015, Proline was the biggest, where they saw the most chlorosis in, and then they kind of went through different ones. But right now they didn't really have a specific one, but that's something they found in the plant clinic when it came in, that didn't have sudden death, but this is what they found.
And they think it is the fungicide, not the surfactant or other products that would be in there with it.
Correct. Yep.
Interesting.
Another one, Jean Payne, she talked a little bit, just to give an update for Illinois. She's the president of Illinois Fertilizer Chemical Association. So she talked a little bit about the dicamba, where it's at. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that federal gave the approval. I know we've talked about this on Cup of Joe, but Illinois has not come out with their label yet, or what's going to be. So they're expecting one pretty quick. But that's going to be down the road here. To know it won't be any longer in the federal, for the date sprayed, and maybe quite a bit shorter. So we'll find out about that for sure. So that was interesting to hear from her. Another one that was really interesting from the U of I was Josie Rudolph. She's an assistant professor there, talking a little bit about mental health. And I don't think we talk about that as much as we should, especially with COVID. We've got, in our ag industry, it's amazing how much more stress, anxiety we have. And the facts that she put out, 27 to 58% for anxiety that people have in a producer or ag business, compared to about 7 or 8% U.S. national, is, it's overwhelming. And we kind of forget about that with producers. And it's nice to, with the COVID going on and we can't get out and there's so much stress, but if a neighbor, if he's acting differently, if he's upset, or you can just tell something's wrong, it's good to ask questions. I say, are you doing okay? everything at home all right? Just ask, because sometimes we don't ask, and it's okay to go to the doctor and say, man, I'm just not feeling good, or ask for help. It's okay. But it's good for family members to come up and say something. So that was really interesting, the facts you put out there. You kind of forget how stressful it is in the ag industry as a whole.
This is not anything new. Ag in general has been very stressful. There's a higher percentage of farmers with mental health concerns than the rest of the population in general.
Yes, definitely. And they kind of have it as the ag industry 1.5 times more on the suicide rate. So the nationals, but it's just good to get some help if we need it. And we don't talk about that enough. And that's been a couple of last conferences I've been at. She does a great job, and it's something we probably should put on the website for, hey, if you have any issues, here you go. This is who you call. In
general, stress on the farm is one of those things that many times we've all, had the ability to talk to our neighbors, and it seems like we're not talking to our neighbors as much as we used to in the old days, for a variety of reasons, not only just COVID, but some of the other issues that's going on in agriculture. In general, talk to your neighbors, reach out, even if it's just to give them a call and say, how you doing? I haven't talked to you for a while. All those things are very, very important to just stay in touch, because that's really what we're all suffering from, is the lack of human interaction, so to speak. And so it is very, very important to do that. So,
Kent, while we got you on the line, what are you seeing? What are farmers talking about right now in Central Illinois, Western Indiana? Was there a lot of hype about Enlist soybeans? Is XtendiFlex the big deal? I mean, you spend all of your time talking with farmers. What are you hearing? What are you seeing out there right now?
It's a common misconception on the flex. Hey, we're good. That a lot of guys are excited about the E3. When we talk and explain about come spraying on Liberty on the flex, and not spraying with Dicamba at the same time, there's some misconceptions, right? So putting the E3 beans, or just with the Enlist and having that option with Liberty, it's just explaining. But there's some guys going looking at stepping their toes into the flex, and we've had some guys that totally switched, who went with a dealer and around Bloomington there, and they got all excited, and they totally went all E3 beans after we showed them the data and everything. So it's good to have another tool in the toolbox. I don't want Dicamba to go away, but we've got to be careful with our neighbors and do the right thing.
Good deal. And that kind of leads into, I guess, what that conversation right there leads into some of the lines that got dropped across my desk this week. We have a Progressive Farmer article that was published, and the title of this article is New 2,4-D and Dicamba Date, 4 Things Missouri Scientist Learns About 2,4-D and Dicamba in 2020. And they basically talk about 4 main points that the University of Missouri scientists have been looking at, and their takeaways from there. And the first point here is that Dicamba and 2,4-D have been found in rainwater. The Dicamba levels are at a higher rate than what the 2,4-D levels are. The 2,4-D levels are very minuscule at this point, but they are accrediting that to the amount of Dicamba that gets preloaded into the air when you have this atmospheric loading effect of the volatilization of Dicamba goes up into that atmosphere, and it can move with rainwater. That's something that they're really paying close attention to now. It's ironic, I was down in southern Illinois and southern Missouri this week, and that got actually brought up by a couple of our growers that we were talking to, and I'd never heard of that before. And then you see an article come out on it, and it's something that we need to pay really close attention to, because we don't want the 2,4-D to get wrapped up in the same situation that the Dicamba is. And I don't think it will, because we have addressed a lot of the volatilization issues that I don't think that the XtendiMax system necessarily has, but it's something that we really need to be paying attention to, because we really want all of the herbicide options that we can possibly have when it comes to fighting weeds, because there's only a select amount of things that work and work really well, and there's nothing new coming down the pipeline from that. Enlist products are less volatile, but still prone to physical drift, so they did more studying and more testing on the volatilization, and they're finding that Enlist does stay put where it belongs, but it is still prone to physical drift. I think it was Bob Hartzler said at one of our meetings that even cement can drift in the wrong situation. So we still have to be careful about when we're applying. We have done a lot of Cup of Joe episodes. We've talked about this to death almost, but we had the pictures where there was physical drift and how those beans looked 4 weeks after the spray application hung a row over too far. So we want growers to still be cognizant, because it's still chemical trespass if things move off target. So you want to make sure that the wind speed's the right direction. You want to do everything according to the label, but that's something that they mentioned here as fact number 2. Number 3, we hit it the past couple weeks. Liberty and Dicamba are not a good mix.
Yeah.
They talk about how volatility with Dicamba increases when glufosinate is added in, and windless days are still a concern for both 2,4-D and Dicamba. So it goes back to following the label. We know that if you're spraying with 0 to 3 mile an hour wind, that opportunity for that chemical to hang in the air is a lot higher. The temperature inversions, if you're spraying at night in that 0 to 3 mile an hour, you're still prone to that, and it doesn't matter. It's kind of like the concrete joke, you know. If you're spraying and that product is hanging in, and you have an inversion that comes up, it can still pull that product up and move it around where we don't want it to be. So be really cognizant of the label, because we really want to be able to use these products into the future. The second one that I had is from Farm Progress, and it talks about soybean shows natural resistance to dicamba. And this study was done in a conventional soybean plot from Mississippi. Yep, Mississippi Fisher Delta Research Center. And they're talking about how they can measure certain soybeans have just a higher natural tolerance to dicamba. Now, you can't go out and spray those beans with dicamba and have them survive, but under very, very low doses, some beans seem to get hammered a lot worse. You see the leaf cupping and curling a lot worse than what you would normally see, and some varieties are almost ineffective. Talk to me a little bit about, we talked pre-air that you've seen this in person before, Turk.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was at a plot down in the Boot Hill, Missouri with Stephen Wessel, and we were looking at this plot, and it had been exposed to two different events of dicamba drift. It was catty corner across the field, and as we're looking at the plot, some varieties were much worse affected than others, and some looked almost unaffected. And so it is real. We didn't really understand what we were looking at the time, but this article confirms that what we were seeing is exactly what we're seeing. So we'll have to have Stephen give us some notes from that back to them.
And what this study is doing, and we'll post both of these links up for our growers or people to go look at if they want. They can actually take aerial imagery of those soybean plots, and basically they're looking at canopy cover and canopy exposure and infrared, so they can like hotter soybeans typically are under higher stress because they can't evapotranspirate as well, and they have all of that stuff layered into data, and you can see the rows that are more yellow are less affected. The rows that lean towards the more purple are more highly affected. So it's something that's really interesting. It's something that I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to as we look in plots, as we travel in dicamba, very, very strong dicamba territory, because this by itself is worth a lot to a grower, because we have lots of growers that want to buy Merschman seeds, but they can't, because they're in fear of protecting themselves. And if this is something we can move forward with, and if we have varieties that have higher natural tolerances, maybe it's something that they can get away with planting in those areas.
Yeah, that does sound good. That visual is very, very telling that the differences between the varieties is out there. So we just got to get them identified and move forward with them. So.
Correct.
Anything else, Ben?
That's what I have for this week.
Again, we talked about, we were all on the virtual meetings, and so I was on a virtual meetings this week with American Seed Trade Association, had their annual conference, and almost all of the speakers from the major companies were talking about gene editing, and that'll be the new buzzword of the future. Obviously, to be able to do a trait insertion anymore to enhance our soybean genetics and yield is going to be cost prohibitive moving forward. I mean, it's pretty much history. So gene editing will be the new wave of the future. It's not the USDA has determined that gene editing is not a GMO event, and so it can be done to enhance genetics and nutrition, pest control within plants, and they're not really doing gene insertion. They're just adjusting those genes to react differently within the plant without replacing them or putting in foreign genes. So, and it's not going to be just in soybeans and in corn. It's going to be in livestock breeding. It's going to be in health. It's going to be in pretty much anything and everything moving forward. So it's going to be a big, big deal. The issue that we have right now is the EU has determined in their mind that gene editing is a GMO event. It is altering the genetics, even though there's not an insertion here. And so the rest of the world is kind of having a talk with the EU and saying, hey, you should reconsider here because it really isn't an insertion. There's no genetic modification here. It is only altering what the genes are doing that are already there. So it is going to be a big deal moving forward in all aspects of everything that we know. And it's going to be a good deal for everything once it's more widely accepted and becomes more feasible and economically viable to do it. So that's one of the big takeaways there. So for me, there was so much stuff that we seen this year or this week, or we heard this week, that it would take three shows to go over it all. Just Kent and I were talking about how much is out there. Maybe some more in the future, but for today, I think we just need to stop there. So that brings me to the corny jokes, and so I was actually sent these by Joe, who wanted to make sure that we got our corny jokes in. So Ben. Where does a snowman keep his money?
No idea.
In a snowbank.
Nice.
I got another one for you. Believe it or not. What do you call an old snowman?
No clue.
Water. And I got a third one. What's the name of a snowman's favorite ant?
No clue.
Come on, Ben.
Snowman's favorite ant. I have no idea.
Antarctica.
Ah, very nice. Joe outdid himself this
There
week.
There we go. All right. Well, that's all we have this week for Cup of Joe. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week.